On this episode of Just Seen It, we review the new ABC drama, Last Resort.
So I'm not going to annihilate 4.3 million Pakistanis without hearing directly from someone whose authority I recognize.
A lot of shows are starting out with this chaotic thing where it's like, oh, it's a hook.
CBS's new take on Sherlock Holmes, Elementary.
I don't guess. I observe. And once I've observed, I deduce.
I felt like that was an update not only to the world, but also to his psyche.
J.J. Abrams' new NBC drama, Revolution.
What is going on?
We don't have much time. It's gonna turn off and it will never, ever turn back on.
There really isn't a whole lot going on yet. We know that there is no electricity.
Fox's new sitcom, The Mindy Project.
I was kind of busy freeing myself from wrongful imprisonment.
Wrongful? My God, you think you'll ever catch the real drunk girl who fell into the pool?
The writing is very specific, and yes, there are some rom-commy things.
And we chat with director Valerie Weiss about her new romantic comedy, Losing Control.
So you're a scientist?
How do you know?
I smell my own.
The thing about being a scientist is that you fail more often than you succeed.
All right here on Just Seen It. The USS Colorado is ordered to fire its nuclear weapons at Pakistan.
I'm not going to annihilate 4.3 million Pakistanis without hearing directly from someone whose authority I recognize.
But when the captain refuses to launch without confirmation, the sub is attacked as a renegade.
I've inbound cruise missile on our position. All hands, emergency team! Emergency team!
Brace for impact!
Fleeing to a remote island, the crew seeks out refuge while trying to clear their names in Last Resort.
Hi, I'm Leah.
And I'm Teresa.
I'm Rachel.
We're gonna get under the surface of this new ABC fall drama called Last Resort. We've all just seen it.
This is a 1-hour drama on ABC. The showrunner is Sean Ryan, who also did The Shield. And it stars Andre Braugher and Scott Speedman.
I hate to say this and be so negative, but
Oh.
this show was so dull and took itself so seriously that if I didn't have to watch it for this review, I would have turned off the television in 10 minutes.
I have to say that there were problems as far as I'm concerned with the dialogue. It was largely expository, and so consequently, there was no real interest for me. I didn't feel like the characters were particularly compelling.
I've been seeing shows where the characters are generic and the plotline is flat and people are busy just for the sake of being busy. I think the first several minutes of it were very much that, and I don't know why, but there are other shows.
It was a rough ride in the beginning.
Yes,
and
there are other shows.
And it was, I didn't get to know the characters, and whenever they spoke, everything they said went over my head.
I have an authenticated fire order through the Antarctic Secondary Network, requesting confirmation of the order through the standard EAM network.
Captain, you have an authenticated fire order.
This season, a lot of shows are starting out with this chaotic thing where it's like, oh, it's a hook. There's so much going on, you have no idea what's happening. Aren't you, enthused about the show? And this does do that. And I do feel like after the first 5 minutes or so, this show does settle down a little bit. And they do start trying to put some humor into the script, which I feel like for something like this is one of the only ways to make these characters human.
The key word here is they tried. I never laughed. It was just too serious, and it was like they're trying to be smart, but they weren't really being smart. It was just like they were just trying to do all of these things, and the execution was not successful. It was just such a dull program.
I do agree that it was trying to do too much in the beginning, and I do agree also that there is a trend where a lot of television shows have kind of adopted a film aesthetic. We're gonna just drop you right into the action at the beginning. We're gonna do cold openings, and we'll just kind of create this mystery and tension.
Which doesn't work because you have the premise, you have the character, you have too many things to try and wrap your head around, so I don't know why that's the new in thing to do.
There were so many characters, I didn't care about any of them, that when they were being silly, I didn't care. I think that's the main thing is this show never drew me to where I cared.
Well, I feel like there's only 3 characters you would care about at this point. There's the captain.
Played by Andre Braugher.
Yes.
We have the XO, who is played by Scott Speedman, and the third character,
which is played by Daisy Betts, is Lieutenant Grace. And I feel like those 3 do have humanity.
Well, I mean, I think that all of these characters are rooted to some degree in an element of reality, but this show presents itself as a thriller. And so by dropping us immediately into the action and having that choppy opening, it does itself a disservice by being on television, because television, the way you capture people in television is by introducing us to the characters.
Correct.
Because you're inviting these people to come into your home. And if you don't hook me with the characters well enough, then the action almost becomes superfluous.
But so many of these shows, the characters grow into the roles, and the show decides a little bit more what it is after the first couple of episodes. You know, their personalities could come out.
I saw the first 5 minutes. I don't want to see the rest of the show. I don't want to give it time and waste hours of my life trying to see if they figure out how to do it
what
right.
they're doing.
You know, one of my pet peeves is when you have action in thrillers is that you put female characters in there and you try and make them act like men.
This is a meeting to allow you to inform me if any member of the crew has acted towards you in a manner offensive to yourself or to the other female members of your rack, or in a manner contrary to the rules and regulations of Navy policy.
But how you supposed to do sensitivity duty? You want to talk about racks?
But Daisy Betts, I feel like she's not totally mopey. She's got like a little bit of a vengeful spirit going on. She gets these guys punished. She gets them into trouble. She gives them a longer sentence
Milquetoast.
than she could. Well, she can't kill them now, can
No,
she? But she's got moments later on where she does become a more powerful presence on the show.
I feel like we can already kind of predict or try and anticipate where the rest of the season is going to go.
That is the thing, because I read something online that does make it sound like this is going to be the new Lost. They're going to get stuck on the island.
No matter what direction this show goes, I don't want to watch it.
It's going to dive.
The pilot didn't interest me, and I wouldn't tune in again. Skip it.
I would not watch Last Resort unless it was the only last resort. I say skip it.
I liked the pilot episode, but I am afraid that it may run aground and turn into a militarized version of Lost. But for now, to be fair, I'm going to give it a very cautious see it.
Our votes add up to 1 ticket, which is a stream it for Last Resort. Cheers.
Sherlock Holmes is recovering from drug addiction, so he is assigned Joan Watson as his sober companion.
I'm here to make the transition from rehab as smooth as possible, so I will be living with you for the next 6 weeks, which means I'll be available to you 24/7.
Holmes invites Watson to assist him on his consultation for the New York police in Elementary.
Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Greg Karber.
I'm Rachel Appelbaum.
I'm Salim Lemelle.
And we're here to review Elementary, which is a new show on CBS that stars Johnny Lee Miller as Sherlock Holmes, Lucy Liu as Watson. So we've all just seen it.
Indubitably.
Indubitably. Greg, what did you think of this?
Well, I really like it. This incarnation of Sherlock Holmes is very much a police procedural like Rizzoli and Isles or Bones. It does not seem like it's going to be a long-form Sherlock Holmes story. They're just two interesting personalities who are going to solve week-to-week mysteries in New York.
Lucy Liu's character, I think, is actually going to be very important because after the opening sequence, she's the first character that we see. She's going up to Sherlock Holmes' house.
One thing that I found interesting about her was, like, you generally have movies where there's, like, some guy and he's got this dark secret and it's crippled him inside, and then it's the part of the woman to figure out what's wrong with him and go in and massage the whole thing. Whereas in this show, Joan Watson is that character. She's got the dark crippling past and she's got the baggage that she walks around with.
Well, I think it's actually both characters, and you kind of find this, you know, near the end of the episode that they both have secrets that we're probably gonna, you know, learn more about as the season goes on, because it's really about these two characters.
I mean, I agree with you. I think that, you know, we will see this friendship develop between the two, and that's the part of Sherlock Holmes that they will be using, is the relationship between Sherlock and Watson.
How do you do it?
Do what?
Guess things.
I don't guess. I observe. And once I've observed, I deduce.
Sherlock Holmes, the essential, like, innovation of his character in detective fiction is this of the super genius, the brain, who will sit down and look at a problem and just sort of deduce the answer. And I was very worried when I started watching this that it was going to be a show about a guy who continually leaps to conclusions about things. And I think they did a really good job with including Sherlock Holmes, but still maintaining the sort of procedural format where you follow along with the detectives. You might be in the dark as to who the killer is, but you're not in the dark as to what their theories are.
Exactly.
He has a big connection with technology. He's always taking pictures, and he's always showing them to people.
I love that. I felt like that was an update not only to the world, but also to his psyche, and that this is sort of an obsessive, character who always wants to have information, and so he's addicted to his iPhone, essentially.
Google, essentially. Yeah. There's even a part where he's like, oh, how did you find that out?
Yeah,
oh,
Google. Which is
And of course Sherlock Holmes would be on Google.
Well, and what's nice too is that, yeah, like we've sort of said, which is that there aren't crazy jumps. We're like, well, how does he know that? And he's like, Google,
yeah.
which is lovely.
She's in the safe room.
Husband didn't say anything about any safe room.
The extra weight of the safe room's steel reinforcements can cause the floor around it to decline slightly, creating a slope between 1 and 5 degrees.
I think what's also interesting is that there's a little bit of maybe a romantic subplot going on. It's very small, but what I like is that we're automatically going to think that this is going to be there, and they tease it in the very first scene of the show, where Sherlock Holmes comes to her and says that you're the love of my life, and then we find out that he's quoting a movie.
I'm hoping this is not going to turn into a romantic story. I'm hoping that this is more of like a 30 Rock kind of dynamic where there's a little bit of tension between them, which just heightens both of the characters and makes it more interesting. But I like the idea that these are two professionals who work together, and I really don't want them to become involved.
Well, this is sort of the X-Files dilemma, where they work well not together, and you're going to have some fans who desperately want them to be together, and some fans who don't want them to be together, and they'll hopefully play with that for the entire length of the show. I'm worried that they'll be making out in like episode 4, though.
Let's talk about the directing a little bit.
Michael Cuesta is the director who also directed 6 Feet Under and Homeland and Dexter, and you know, he seems to do a really good job with pacing, character development. I think it's definitely more of an American style show. One thing that's so exciting about the British version is that it's so quick, it's so fast. You have to really be thinking the whole time. You can't be watching this late at night and zoning out. This show is gentler, but it still does keep you on your toes. It still is, you know, hints and clues, and you still have to be engaged to, you know, to keep up.
Obviously, in comparison to the British show, this is not flashy at all, like you said.
If you're going to take Sherlock Holmes and put him in the modern day and have Lucy Liu play Watson, at some point you have to introduce expected conventions so that people can watch it without it blowing their minds. Elementary puts Sherlock Holmes in a pretty typical police procedural, but it's a pretty typical police procedural with Sherlock Holmes, so see it.
I think that this show offers a really good balance between plot and character developments. It's intriguing. See it.
I think this is a great American version of the Sherlock Holmes tale. See it. Cheers, mates.
Cheers.
In this new NBC drama from executive producer J.J. Abrams, electricity stops working on a global scale.
What the hell is going on?
As a result, 15 years later, a new world without technology has emerged. But a young girl seeks out to discover the reason for the blackout in Revolution.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Greg.
I'm still Liz.
And I'm Aaron, and we're here to talk about the new NBC drama called Revolution. We've all just seen it, and I think, Greg, you should start.
Well, Revolution is an hour-long, post-apocalyptic drama set in a world with no electricity. The showrunner is Eric Kripke, who was the showrunner for Supernatural, and the pilot episode was directed by Jon Favreau.
This show is executive produced by J.J. Abrams, who we know from such things as Lost, Felicity, Alias, Star Trek, Super 8, the list goes on. So, past the premise, there really isn't a whole lot going on yet. We know that there is no electricity, and there are survivors living on Earth. I think it's 15 years later. They're living in sort of a weird kind of Amish, you know, present-day hybrid of a lifestyle because...
They live in like a suburban cul-de-sac that they've sort of turned into an Amish farm.
Right.
The problem with it, though, is that although the world has changed, it doesn't seem like people have changed at all. Everybody still acts like they, you know, go to, like, suburban high schools.
It's like it happened a week ago.
Yeah,
like you don't actually feel the 15 years.
It happened a week ago, but nobody really is that shooken up about it.
Well, I don't know. They form a militia, and I think that very quickly they turn into brother against brother, and awkward paranoid strategies ensue.
That's the other thing I don't really understand.
We see that the political situation has changed, that there is some sort of strange republics that have taken over what is America, but we don't really see that like their day-to-day lives, that they interact with each other any differently than they did before.
Tracy Spiridakos plays Charlie, the female protagonist of this show. She's very much like Katniss from The Hunger Games, I think.
For the material, I actually was impressed by Tracy Spiridakos, even though she's a very pretty face and she's a very interesting character and she's almost just like a placeholder. But there's one moment where she breaks down into tears.
I have lost everyone that I care about. My mom is dead. My dad is dead. And God knows what they're doing to Danny right now. So you are gonna help me get him back.
Why's that?
Because we're family.
Well, they do set up a theme quite quickly, and that theme is family. I mean, they take what used to be a vast, grandiose society, and they break it down into little units, you know, and that's what these Amish communities that we're referring to. But then our character, Charlie, goes in search of her uncle. And why? Because they're family. This is something that keeps coming up over and over again.
The only reason that there's a theme of family is because Charlie needed to get to her Uncle Miles, played by Billy Burke, who is another one of the protagonists of the show. They needed to get together. They needed to get off on whatever journey they're going to get off on. And that was the only way for it to happen, is to make family be important in the pilot.
Yes.
Who knows if it will be.
It was a device.
Yeah, they used it well.
I felt like these weren't really characters. They were people who were reacting to their immediate circumstances. Bad guys would come in, and then they would react to those bad guys, but they never really seemed to bring any history to their interaction.
And their reactions to the stuff that isn't new, just the day-to-day stuff, it's like it's for the first time, too. That's the real problem is, like I said before, it's like they look like they've only been there for a week or a day. And it's like, I'm not used to all these things that we've been used to for 15 years. Well, it's just unrealistic. Right. There really isn't a whole lot going on in this pilot episode until about the last 15 minutes. And we really don't go anywhere until the end of this episode when we get, I think, 2 really big twists thrown our way that inform how we're going to view this show in totality. So does that mean that it's a well-written show?
Yeah. But it got me on. I mean, I want to see the next episode because of these twists. And I think
me too.
The first half of the show, the first 3/4 of the show, were so cheesy and schmaltzy that it got me on that level as well. I actually was pretty entertained by the ridiculousness of everything. In this show, we have no sense of irony. We have no levity. It's really just by the concept. And that's why I choose to read it as a goofy show.
The show takes itself so seriously that you think it must be joking.
Yes, exactly. It
All right,
must
I
be
just want to make sure.
joking.
Good action and great special effects save a less than stellar story. There's nothing revolutionary about NBC's Revolution. Stream it.
It's definitely not the best show I've ever seen, but it's got some cool twists, and I really want to know what's going to happen. So I'll watch it on the internet, stream it.
I have a feeling it's all going to get far too complicated, but for now, I actually really want to know what happens next. Stream it.
Fair enough.
Mindy Kaling stars in this new Fox sitcom about a young doctor obsessed with romantic comedies.
Now watching one of my favorite movies. I just delivered a baby into this world. This is working.
But practicing medicine has put her own love life in shambles.
Sorry, Danny. I didn't have time to get dolled up for you.
Mindy tries her best to balance relationships and work in The Mindy Project.
Thanks for joining us. I'm David.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Sean, and we're going to talk about a new Fox comedy show called The Mindy Project. We've all just seen it. Rachel, why don't you tell me a little bit about this show?
Well, Mindy Kaling is the star of the show, and she was Kelly on The Office, and she was also a writer for that. She's a writer here, and the star, and the executive producer, along with Howard Klein, and it is a fantastic show. It starts out with some flashbacks of her as a youngin', going through her period of watching romantic comedies, and then we sort of fast forward to her as this professionally successful OBGYN who has some social issues. Her personal life is rather in a shambles.
No, I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, I'm a big fan of The Office, and I think that this is a different type of show, but it's got the same kind of promise. The characters are all really interesting and really distinct. Sure. If anything, I think maybe the rom-com part of it might be a little bit too obvious.
Be specific.
Well, I mean, she sometimes mentions people as being, that's like Hugh Grant in Notting Hill or something like that. I'm a little afraid that if the show continues to touch that base, it might get too specific.
I will allow it.
You will allow it.
She will allow it.
So far in the pilot, it doesn't take over too much. So if they keep it the way it is in the pilot, it'll be just fine.
I agree with you. It's not too on the nose. They bring it in just the right amount.
The writing in the show is my favorite part. Well, I mean, the acting's great too, but the writing is very specific. And yes, there are some rom-com-y things, but there's always a twist to them. There are some funny moments where there's like sort of special effects and things. A sequence where a Barbie doll may or may not be talking to her. Just like some wonderful whimsical things.
I think it's a lot like the Gilmore Girls writing, very fast-paced, very witty, and really keeps you engaged.
And the characters, the thing is that the premise isn't that unusual. You know, we have a woman who is struggling, and we have the contrast between her professional life and her social life. She's vulnerable, but also she's a little bit snooty at times.
Yeah, she's a little snarky.
She's a little bit superficial, which you don't often see, especially
which I love.
Especially in someone who's talking about body image at one point and seems vulnerable, and then the next moment she's a little judgy, and I think that's great. I think it's just such a fun dichotomy.
Chris Messina plays Danny Castellano, who is Mindy's foil, and he's one of her cohorts and one of the other doctors at the hospital. And I won't say that he's a better doctor than her, but he's clearly a more professional doctor than she is.
But he's also kind of a jerk, which again is one of the lovely things. All of these characters have, you know, opposing characteristics that make them fun to watch.
You know, you actually didn't do a terrible job with that breach.
I knew it, you stalker. I knew it. You're trying to steal my delivery.
Well, sure, I never know when you're gonna get wasted and spend the night in jail. I gotta pounce on those opportunities.
What's great about him is that he seems to have a little bit of sexual tension with Mindy, which will be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Most male characters on the show seem to have some sexual tension with Mindy.
But that would be
that's going to be the guy to watch, though.
Right.
I think because there's so much opposites in a lot of ways that it will be fun to watch them sort of clang up against each other.
And I do want to point out, though, the one thing that bums for me is that they sort of gloss over the whole doctor part of this show. And you kind of wonder, okay, so she's a doctor, right?
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure. She's so kind of loopy. I wasn't sure how she exactly studied to pass the MCAT or
Right, how did
like
she
that.
make it to be this really great doctor?
Yeah.
I love that about her, though.
Okay.
I love the fact that she's a mess when she's in her personal life, but, you know, I can relate to the idea of, like, okay, I have to be professional now. I have to rein it in, and she does, and she's got, like, almost 2 split personalities, and as an actor, what a gift to get to bounce between those extremes.
But specifically talking about Kaling, if you look at her on The Office, she plays a very specific type that fits very well as a supporting member of that show. And you wouldn't think necessarily from seeing her performance that she would be leading lady material for her own show, but she is. She's very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I really like seeing her. I think she's got a lot of potential on screen. I think Kaling has a great presence, and this is an exciting new show for the fall season. So I'm going to say see it.
This is a funny show, and I'd really like to see where they go with the supporting characters. I give it a see it.
Yeah, Mindy. Yeah, writing. Strong female character, definitely a see it.
All right. To Mindy.
Mindy.
Why did you say no to Ben?
Nothing leading up to being married was the way that I planned. How do I know that being married will be? Hi, thank you for joining us. I'm Liz.
I'm Sean.
And here today at Just Seen It, we're lucky enough to get an industry interview with the fabulous Valerie Weiss, writer-director of Losing Control, starring Miranda Kent and Reed Scott.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your film and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. Losing Control is a quirky romantic comedy about a female scientist who wants proof that her boyfriend is the one. And it is an idea that I had. I actually used to be a scientist. I did a PhD at Harvard, like all filmmakers do in biophysics before, because someone told me that was a prerequisite to...
They all have that.
They all have that.
Orson Welles has like 5 degrees in
Totally.
science.
I feel very intimidated by him. So anyway, that's where I got the idea to make the movie. And we just had a theatrical release in 9 cities.
So, Losing Control is a romantic comedy. I'm just curious about your opinion on the romantic comedy genre as it is right now. Is this a response to films, or is this something that you're sort of making as part of the genre?
For me, it was very much a response to films. I used to love romantic comedies, especially, growing up. 80s romantic comedies were my favorite. When Harry Met Sally or Romancing the Stone, such great movies because the characters were really well-rounded and interesting and so flawed. I feel like romantic comedies today, the women especially, are so perfect. I mean, they look perfect, their jobs are perfect, and their problems are not really problems. And so I wanted to make a movie about a smart woman who was having problems with her love life, and not that she was necessarily choosing a love life over a career. It's equally important to many, many women. Having been a scientist in the lab, I thought this would be a great setting for a screwball comedy. The world of academic science is so absurd.
So you said that you like personal films, and the character in the film is a scientist, and you studied science. What other elements are autobiographical?
I think a lot of her psychology in the movie is very much comes from a real place. And the thing about being a scientist is that you fail more often than you succeed. So the thing that scientists know really well is failing, and artists know that too. There's actually a lot of similarity between being a scientist and being an artist. And so her frustration with having to do this experiment over and over again, and her self-confidence suffering and having it bleed into her personal life and feeling like, I don't know if I should marry you or not, which is the premise of the movie.
So how about that proposal scene? I mean, that's taking place in a coat closet. I don't think that that's probably autobiographical, but was that just coming from your mind, or was there an experience there that someone had that you put on screen?
You know, the proposal scene is really the whole premise of the movie, this idea that he asks her to marry him and she's not sure.
Sam, I'm convinced there isn't a better person for you in the entire world, and there's no one better for me. What are you doing?
Nothing.
You keep moving your finger away.
No, I'm not.
I love setting it in a coat room because I think movies paint these pictures of where a proposal is supposed to happen at sunset or a fancy restaurant, and the fact that it happens in this rushed way in a place that nobody intended it, I think, is the real psychology of what's going on in this couple, and also the anxiety people don't talk about around getting married. And so it's really fun for me to set it there and have it be this private event in this very public place.
And that scene is also really great because it combines kind of the screwball elements that you have in the film with some of the more realistic elements that you're talking about here.
I love absurdity. I love Christopher Durang, the playwright, and Edward Albee. And what I really wanted to do in the movie is have real people and have all their motivations grounded in real psychology, but lead to a series of events that were larger than life that would happen to them, because I think that happens in life. I mean, crazy stuff happens, but it's fun to see characters have to play these things out.
How can people see Losing Control?
We already had our theatrical release, so we'll be coming out on video October 9th, and you can see us in all the usual places, Netflix and iTunes and Amazon, and buy and rent the movie.
All right. Well, Valerie, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Sean.
I wish you much success on your film, Losing Control, and all your endeavors.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
To Losing Control.
Cheers.
We gave ABC's new drama, Last Resort, a stream it. We gave CBS's new show, Elementary, a see it. We weren't so sure about J.J. Abrams' new show on NBC, Revolution, so we gave that one a stream it. For the Mindy Project on Fox, we gave that a see it. We're very thankful for Valerie Weiss for dropping by and letting us chat with her about her new romantic comedy, Losing Control. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week on Just Seen It.
You don't show up at a Springsteen show wearing a John Cougar Mellencamp t-shirt unless you want to get punched in the face.